Well, hello out there in Manchester land on Hooksett and Auburn. It's the progress report for this Wednesday.
Welcome
Geez,
back,
the
Bob.
19th, right?
Yeah, it's the 19th. We're almost through it.
Good thing I
Good-
remembered.
good
Tomorrow's
to
my
have you
daughter's
back.
birthday. Well, thank you. It's really good to be back. It's a long drive to Northeast Georgia, and I'm really glad to be back in the Queen City and with you, Mike. And
Well, let me tell you, I get scared when I'm out here on the progress report without you, Bob. So
Oh,
I'm
I
glad
don't-
to have you back.
nice of you to say, but I don't believe it for a minute. And Mike has arranged this program. It's going to be an excellent one. We have two excellent guests, and I'm going to let him just take it right over because we're going to talk about some interesting parts of New Manchester history, which is a fascinating history. And I think he's favoring us with another one of his new features, the POTUS report on the progress report.
We have a very brief, and I'm glad you got the title right, Bob. That's good. Thanks very much for that. We have a very brief POTUS report for the progress report. As I've said every week when I try to do this particular portion of the show, it's very hard to keep up. A lot of times I'll have something ready to talk about, and something will happen on the day of the show that completely changes everything. And this time I'm not going to let the up-to-the-minute news change my focus. I'm going to go with what the president wanted to talk about this week. This week has been declared Made in America Week in the United States of America by presidential declaration, and the purpose of that was to focus on making things in America, bringing manufacturing back to America. And I'm sure that any of you who have been paying attention understand that the president has a line, many lines of things that he sells, and throughout the campaign it was pointed out that some of that was not made in America. Majority of that wasn't made in America, so I guess it's made in America for you, but for me, we'll take the profits. Today, I want to very briefly focus on a chart that I found. People don't realize this, but whenever anything gets shipped, the ship and the goods on it, all this stuff is written down, and people keep track of that because it's all insured. This is very important stuff. So, to the ton. People know where things leave ports and where they end up. And I have a chart that I'd like to put up on the screen if we can put that up. And, well, a little glitch, but we'll get to it. It's coming in a moment. No?
Joys of live TV.
I thought this was going to be a brief POTUS report.
Maybe briefer than you
It
expected.
could be, because it's all I've got. If we don't have the chart, we're going to just conclude with a description of the chart, which you guys are going to love. But basically, it looks like we may not have it. But basically, what this shows is since January of 2016, it showed the tons, the actual shipping trajectories of the ships that have brought tons and tons, over 200 ships, 200 container ships, bringing tons of goods that are being sold on the American market under the Ivanka Trump line. Everything, every type of clothing and jewelry you can imagine, made in Bangladesh, South Korea, Japan, China, Indonesia, coming into through the Suez Canal, through the Panama Canal, to the western ports at Long Beach, into New York City, into Seattle. It was a beautiful chart. I wish I could show it to you, but basically that's the point. It is Made in America Week for you, but not for them. Not for the the Trumps. And that's the POTUS report for this week. Sorry we couldn't make it work, but that's the technicalities of live TV. Let's get on to the good stuff.
Let's get on to the good stuff. We have two wonderful guests. I'd like you to introduce
Well,
them for us.
I'd love to introduce Pat Howard and Aurora Eaton. These two ladies are spearheading a new effort to make Manchester a better place to live, and we're going to talk about that. But first, I'd like to welcome both of you. Pat and Aurora, welcome to the Progress Report. We're very glad to have you here. One of the things that we constantly harp on here on the Progress Report is that Manchester is a great place. And it's a great place because there are people that a lot of folks don't even know about that are working hard to make it a great place. It doesn't just happen. It takes effort. And you two ladies have been part of that effort for a long, long time. And we would like to kind of highlight the work that you do and then talk about this new project that you're taking on. So, Pat, why don't we start with you? Could you just kind of let us know who you are? How did you end up in Manchester? Why are you interested in things like historic preservation? Tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I wasn't born in Manchester. We came here in 2000, And the thing that got me really inspired was Stark Park, because at one point they were going to close off the park. And all the neighbors just rose up and said, no, no, we need to open the park. So that was our big project, and a lot of things have happened in the park, and people who go to it know how wonderful it is now. There's a bandstand, a great bandstand, a big equestrian statue of General Stark, which leads to us to this next
I mean,
project.
that when I was a kid, I can remember going to Stark Park with my grandparents. We would climb on the cannonballs and the cannons, and there was that great statue of General John Stark, our local hero, our state hero. And the sword was bent, and there was graffiti on it, and it was not as attractive as it is today. So
Right.
I think folks can probably remember the condition that you found it in.
It was in pretty bad shape, and some of the pictures were pretty interesting to take for the grants, because
Did you say they were actually thinking of closing the park?
well, that was the plan long ago. That was
I
in
never
about
knew
2004.
about that.
They were going to put rocks so that
Yep.
people couldn't drive in. And
Oh.
we said, no, let's make it more welcoming, let's make it safer, let's do this. So
shocking.
we did those things. The Friends of Stark Park is and has been a very active group. So, and we also restored the gravesite of General John Stark, so that was a big project too.
And that we'll talk a little bit about that after we do the introductions. I do want to get back to that because that was a very faithful restoration. You brought that to where it originally was. But we can't forget Aurora Eaton. You've been a guest on the Progress Report before. Thanks for coming back. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get your interest in Manchester history, which I think has become almost legendary.
I don't know. I'm not quite at the legendary stage, but I actually am a native of Manchester. I grew up here, giving away my age to some extent in the 50s and 60s and on the west side in the Franco-American neighborhood, so I am of French-Canadian background. So, you know, I'd like to mention that I had, in grammar school, had a half a day of French and a half a day of English, though don't ask me to speak French. I can understand it very well. But so that was actually quite a blessing and a benefit to have, you know, the two cultures going at once. But in high school, we actually had moved to Hooksett, of all places, and lived there for a few years. And so I actually went to Pembroke Academy, which was a wonderful experience. It's a great school. And then we moved back to Manchester. So my experience has been really interesting growing up. And I didn't really get interested in the local history, though, until I went away for 10 years in the 70s and came back in the 80s, and then started getting into genealogy and into local history, and had done some theater work, etc. So I was really into the whole storytelling kind of thing, and gradually got involved with the Historic Association and worked there in the early 90s and did some other things, and then came back in 2006 and worked there until 2014. So when I left, I was the executive director, so that was really a great job to have. And since that time, I've been mostly just doing writing, historical writing, and produced a book a couple of years ago about the Amoskeag Manufacturing Company.
I'm just curious, how
Yep.
far back can you trace your family history in Quebec prior to coming to Manchester?
You can. It's pretty easy to trace your history because,
Quebec has
especially
good
since we
records.
have the American Canadian Genealogical Society (ACGS) here in Manchester, and they have great church records, so you can trace it back to the 1600s generally. Some people came in the 1700s. From the 1600s, quite often you can actually go further back because of records in France, and so. Don't want to brag, but I actually have one of my family lines goes all the way back to Charlemagne, which is
Wow.
me and like 5 million other people, so it's not that uncommon. But there were only, I think, about 10,000 immigrants who actually came to New France. So literally, if somebody is from Canada and they're French Canadian heritage, quite literally, you are probably 99.9% sure that you are their cousin in some way, because they were
there's
so interrelated.
There's a
Yeah.
great work by a Catholic priest, Cyprian Tangway.
Oh,
And
yes, absolutely.
That's a go-to source for
It's a
any Quebec genealogist.
Go-to
And-
source, but ACGS here in Manchester is a wonderful organization, and if you do have any French, or even any Canadian, especially Quebec, even if it's not French, they can really help you with that. If it's Irish or whatever, they can really help you with that lineage. So I have one Scottish ancestor and one German ancestor from the 1700s, and that's it, as far as I know, and some Indians. So I'm pretty French. But so local history has been my thing, and in recent past couple of years, I've been branching out and writing a lot about New Hampshire history all over the state, which has been really fascinating. And I have a weekly column in the Union Leader. looking back.
Yeah,
Since
how long have you been
20
doing that?
Since 2011, and end of 2011, so it's been
Wow.
almost 6 years, yeah.
That's a lot of writing.
Every week, I think I've missed 2 weeks. 2 weeks, yeah.
That's very good.
What's it like writing on
Yeah.
a deadline like that?
You know,
are you using work that you've already done, or
No,
are you
well,
writing
I
to
did
deadline?
originally, but I am doing more original stuff now. The thing that makes it easy is I can do a lot of research online. A lot of books have been scanned and all that, and so it's a good discipline. I write 700 words. If you counted my words every week, it would be 698 to 701.
Oh, you're pretty good at that. Huh?
I watch the word count. Oh, I don't need that adjective, or I should put an adjective in. And my husband Scott is my editor, so he reviews it before I
Oh,
send
yeah?
it
Is he
to
good
the
editor
later.
for you?
He's very good, yes. And I go,
Yes.
what did you find? He uses a red.
Good editors.
He uses
real,
a red
real
pen.
asset
He uses
for
a red
writer,
pen.
for sure. Okay.
Well,
So-
we haven't even gotten into the topic, and
Yeah.
we've already
Call.
got a caller. So
Yeah.
we've got John on line one.
Hey, John. Happy to have you join us on the Progress Report. Go right ahead.
Bob, is that you? Bob Backus?
It seems to be. It might be. I'll plead
Hey,
guilty.
it's John Hopwood.
Yeah.
Hey, John,
Hi,
how you
John.
doing?
How are you?
Oh, we're in for a treat now.
Hey, I hear WMUR is looking for me. They say on a article they're searching for me.
Really?
I call him in because I'd like to tell John DeSpasso I'm over at Forza Viata on 2nd Street, in the west side of Manchester, near the old Bedford Grove, having a margarita. Tell him to bring a camera.
Good for
I know why they want you, John. You know why they
I
want
really
you.
can't hear you very well because we're having a great time here.
Well,
I hear I was at the Board of Aldermen meeting. We're just talking about that. It is the Board of Aldermen now. Did you see that the Ready for Teddy campaign committee sent out something that looks like official looking, where the mayor is asking for your input?
yes, I got one of those.
Yeah, he says that one of the questions is, do you think that the Board of Aldermen should get fringe benefits? Notice that it's not the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. It's not the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. Because our mayor, who viciously criticizes people who take aldermen like Joe Lavasser or school board members that take fringe benefits, has, the last time I saw, when I reported on it back in 2015, took over $30,000 in benefits himself.
Hey, John.
And so, isn't that interesting? That
Yeah,
it
it
does the
is.
word mayor.
It's really
Yes, it
interesting,
is.
John, but I have to tell you, we're doing a program on Manchester history tonight. And I think you're into kind of contemporary
I can tell you
politics.
about the Demobond back in the 60s when the place was a gambling heaven with sports rings. But I will let you go, and you guys take care. But just tell John DeSpasso that, that's whatever he has done, if he's searching for me. Take care.
We'll give him a call.
Bye.
Thanks, John.
I know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
The News Today reported that Mayor Gatsis is suing a former alderman for defamation for something that John Hopwood had something to do with. But that's another topic. That's
We'll get to that next
politics.
week or the following.
Okay, so we should get back to our story about Stark Park and other parts of Manchester history.
And I do want to get back. Let's talk. I'd like to take a step back so that we can now move into what you guys are starting in on, which is why we have you here. This great project that you're starting on. We're teasing the people; they got to pay attention so they can watch. You're coming from some experience in taking a park that needed some work and organizing, mobilizing, motivating the neighborhood, the people of the city, and making an improvement. And when we come back from our break, I'd like to very briefly go back and talk about all of the things you touched on them. The restoration of the statue and all that. And I'd like to talk about the methodology that you used, how you organized the neighborhood to get that done. And then from there, I'm hoping we can kick into this new project that you guys are doing. But we got to take our first break. We'll regroup for a second. We'll be right back.
And the call-in number is 640-3091, and we do welcome callers, as we've already proved.
Yeah.
So call us if you want to participate in this discussion. We'll be right back.
See you on the other side.
So this is the progress report for this Wednesday, July 19th. And we are talking about some Manchester history with two really great ladies who know and have helped preserve and also write about this history, Aurora Eaton and Pat Howard, very active in the rebirth of Stark Park. One of the questions I had, we can't talk about Manchester without talking about Amoskeag and the fact that they laid out this city with all the parks. Did that include Stark Park? Was that part of the Manchester, the Amoskeag plan for the city, or is it? Because
It actually was not.
No.
yeah. So
But
how did Stark Park come about?
It was a bequest of Stark's sister.
Oh, really?
And it was one of the very first parks in Manchester. It in fact was General Stark's farm, and so as time moved on, it was given to the city.
Well, that's something I didn't know. Okay.
And there was actually a Stark mansion approximately at that location, which was lost to fire not too long ago. Before
Oh, it was in the 1850s.
Well,
Actually.
was it that
Yeah,
long
it was that
ago?
long
Oh,
ago.
okay.
It was on the property that's now the Sununu Youth Development Center.
Yes, yes.
there's
So
a-
that farm extended all the way from
all
Stark
the
Park
way
all the
to
way
that,
along.
yeah.
And what views, huh?
Yeah,
Views of
beautiful.
across the river of Uncanunic. I mean, can you think of a better, if you're going to see Manchester as an agricultural location, can you think of a better, location for a farm in the city? I mean, it's really something. But I want to talk about the act of privately working to improve a public space. And that's something that you have experience with.
I do, but what we have to say is that we worked completely and closely with Parks and Rec through this whole thing. It was fabulous.
That's part of
We
the
had-
enlightenment that we're hoping that you can give us. Tell us
And-
how does it work that a group of people can push a city to improve a park like that, by contributing. Tell us a little
Well,
bit about that
The
experience.
city put together a master plan. We all thought we need a master plan to figure out how to get this park back to its at least sort of original situation. And the city paid for that, and a bunch of us met at that time, including the mounted police. I mean, people were right in there right from the start, and that's how it all came about. We operated just as neighbors and concerned neighbors for a while, but then we did set up a 501c3. And to this day, that 501c3 exists. So it was a real partnership with the city, without a doubt.
So you guys, raised money to seed some of the renovation, some of the restoration, and then were able to leverage that by using city resources? How did the partnership make the sum greater than the parts?
Well, one of the things that happened that was wonderful, we had a newsletter and we sent it out, and looking at the master plan, a bandstand was not first on the priority at all. There had been a small little summer, I don't know what they call it, summer cottage thing that they called a bandstand, but it wasn't really. But we put out a newsletter and we said to the neighbors, and we used to go around and put them, at people's porches and stuff, what do you think about a bandstand in Stark Park? Because the idea was that would bring people to the park. And so this wonderful woman named Ann Hastings said, I will give you half the funds if you raise the other half. And that was our first big project.
Wow.
So that's where that started. So with everything else, we applied for grants. There were wonderful donations from private people. There was some city money, without a doubt. So it was a great combination of people who got together and made this happen.
Now, I guess these concerts you have in the summertime are become rather popular. You have
They're
big crowd.
fabulous.
People come from. Is it mostly neighborhood people, or do people come from?
I think, no, people come from far and afield
Well,
because...
I've come from as far as the South End to
Well,
see
there
a
you go. That's a long way. No, people do come from all over the place. And most Sundays, there are 300 to 500 people in the park, depending on the band. So it's very popular. And people love it. They just love it. And people who lived in Manchester as children, as you did, Mike, they just can't believe how wonderful it looks. So
Well, it's a great
it's
idea.
great.
I was pretty skeptical. I thought, hey, everybody's interested in watching baseball or being out of the city, and I mean, I just got to say congratulations on getting this done and having it be such a great success.
Thank you. We have weddings in the bandstand. We have parties and picnics and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But it has been very successful. And that was really the impetus to get people to the park.
Now, this organization still exists. Are there plans for further things to be done in the park?
Yes, with respect to the master plan, there's work to be done on the trails that lead down from the park towards the river. There's work to be done there. The roads are pretty bad. We all need to work on that, I think. And that is an expensive proposition, without a doubt, but over time, that'll happen. Doing a sign on each tree identifying the species of the trees, that's in the works. So there's lots of things happening.
Well, good.
And as if that wasn't enough, you've now turned your sights to another project. And now let's start talking about the real meat and potatoes of why we wanted to have you guys on the show. You're looking right in the heart of downtown Manchester at a park which I do believe was part of the Amoskeag Park system. Correct me if
Yes,
I'm
correct.
wrong,
Yes, it was.
Bob. Why don't you tell us, I don't want to steal the thunder, tell us about the new project, what you guys, where it is, what you have in mind, what need did you see, and how do you plan on filling it?
This project is it's focused on one thing. It's not, the Stark Park project was a whole community thing and a much bigger project. This is one monument, and our whole focus is to raise money in working with the city to be able to restore the Pulaski, General Casimir Pulaski Monument, which is in Pulaski Park, a very visible monument in Manchester.
And let's remind folks that that park is the park on Bridge Street that
Correct.
anyone driving out of the
Yes.
city up
And
Bridge
it's
from Elmo.
Manchester's other equestrian statue besides the Stark statue. And this one was installed in 1938 as part of the WPA art project.
No kidding.
There are only two equestrian statues in the city?
Yeah, I don't think of any other.
I can't either, now that you mention it, but I
they
hadn't
do
thought
stand
about
out.
it.
And the
So
thing
I
that's
hadn't either.
interesting is, even by 1938, there really were very few equestrian statues being created in the United States. So probably the Stark one is unusual because that's 1948, correct?
Yes, it is.
So this is a different kind of a project because we're not going to be forming a separate 501c3, and we're actually not focusing on the whole park. We really are concentrating just on the monument.
Now,
which-
why is that? What makes you
Why
want to
is that?
focus on this
I think it's
monument?
because we feel that that's what we can handle at this point, and the city already has some
Well, I was
plans.
getting more to the condition of the monument, actually.
Condition of the
Yeah,
monument,
it's
it really
bad
needs
shape.
some
Cries
work.
out for attention.
It has cracks in it, it split seams, it has corrosion, it has mold and mildew on the base, on the granite base, and it has a lot of bronze elements to the statue and plaques that need to be restored. It's in really terrible shape. And the reason that this all came about is because last year in August, the Currier Museum of Art, working with me, we did a tour of Manchester Park looking at the monuments, and Pat was looking up and saying, "Oh my gosh, he really needs help."
He needs work.
And that is absolutely a gorgeous monument. It's a life-size equestrian statue, very, very detailed, of a Revolutionary War hero who has a great deal of meaning to everyone who's an American, but also especially to the Polish community, because that park was dedicated to the Polish
And
community.
that was a very Polish
Very
neighborhood
Polish
back in
neighborhood.
Manchester's early days.
1933 is when the park, which used to be called Tremont Park, was rededicated as Pulaski Park, and then a committee was formed in 1934, and they started working with the WPA and the federal government to be able to build this statue. Louis Hippolyte Gosselin from Manchester, who was a sculptor, a well-trained sculptor, been trained in Paris, was the artist who created
Now, that's
this
not a
monument.
Polish name, Goss.
No,
French.
Canadian.
Plus, that brings up a whole point, is this was supported, they had to raise $10,000 besides the WPA's contribution, the federal government contribution to this, which this committee did raise, and some of the money, quite
In
a
the
bit of money.
1930s, that was a
1930s,
tough
it's the
hill to
Depression
climb.
era.
Sure
And the
it
money
was.
came not just from the Polish community, but also the Franco-American community, because they loved this artist. This was one of their artists, and from a lot of other people in Manchester. This was a very popular project.
So there's deep roots.
There's deep
Yeah.
roots.
Local roots.
And when the monument was unveiled and had a big ceremony, August 21st, 1938 was a big day in Manchester. There was a big parade on Elm Street, and there was a huge banquet, and there was all the dignitaries. The governor of the state, Governor Murphy, was there, and Bishop Peterson from the Roman Catholic Church, and a whole bunch of other dignitaries were there, and they had all these speeches, and they just had this huge parade and a huge banquet. It was a really, really big thing. Thousands of people participated. This was not only big for Manchester, but because of General Casimir Pulaski, who died when he was 34 years old. He came here from Poland. He was a war hero who really pretty much created the American cavalry. He
Yeah.
really, he died at the Battle of Savannah in Georgia, and in October of 1779, he was injured and then he passed away. And he was practically like a son to George Washington, so he's a very beloved person, especially with the Polish community. Because of this love of him in the Polish community, this monument was supported by people all over the state who were Polish Americans, and by Polish American parishes and organizations, not just in New Hampshire, but throughout New England, especially in Massachusetts. So when they had the parade, all these people came from everywhere, and all these marching bands and everything, and it was not just a local thing. This was a huge thing. And like you said, it was during the Depression, so it was really a bright spot, I think, during the Depression, and I think it was very well appreciated by everybody.
One of the things that interests me, and I've talked to Mike about this, is that my father was a doctor and graduated from the University of Medical School, and his first job was being a medical officer to a CCC crew up in northern New Hampshire, way up in the Connecticut Lakes region. And it's just fascinating to me to see how often we run into the legacy of the New Deal.
Right.
The CCCs in particular, but others. I mean, this I didn't know about. The WPA, there's something that they contributed to, the life of this community and our society, and we're still getting the benefit of it.
If I can just say about that walking tour, Kurt Sundstrom, who is a curator at the Courier, led the tour with Aurora, and it was fabulous because people don't know what wonderful things we have here in Veterans Park, in Victory Park, Pulaski Park. So, I mean, it was really an eye-opener for me because, and maybe, I hope we can open some more eyes here, because when people drive by that, and he's very grand, he looks fabulous, but that statue is in dire need of work. So we said that day, and that's why we're here.
Well, speaking of Veterans Park, that was in pretty tough shape. I'm thinking, maybe 10 years ago? And didn't we have a group associated with Harvard come up and refurbish a lot of the statues there?
They were focused on the Civil War monument,
Yeah.
which is not in horrible shape, but it's really at the point now where it's going to need some more work.
Again, because
And
they
that
did
is
a
a
complete
wonderful-
restoration of that.
Yeah.
I'm going to say back in
Yeah,
like
80s,
88,
late 80s.
87,
Yeah, the whole park
something like
was-
that.
was-
Well, could that happen with the Pulaski statue too? So that's
Well, that's
Well, it depends.
That's our project.
We are working on it, but we have some really good people who've looked at it, and we know what to do. We just need to raise some money, and it's public-private partnerships really do work well in Manchester. Back in the late 90s, I worked for the Cambridge, Massachusetts Historical Society, and I took a group up here. It was at the time City Hall was being renovated, which was a public-private partnership. The people from Cambridge got a tour at City Hall. They met the mayor. They were completely flabbergasted because they had never heard of such a thing as a public-private partnership, because it's a different city. They have a different system of doing things, and if there's something to be renovated, they usually have the funds or whatever. But in Manchester, if something needs to be done, we usually find a way to do it. And so this is definitely a public-private partnership and working with the Parks Department. But also we have a lot of support already from the Polish community in Manchester, from the two Polish parishes, and they're gung-ho and can't wait for us to kind of get this off the ground. And we're working on that. So.
well. You've set up. You're not going to set up a separate 401c3. If someone wanted to get involved, how would they? Do you have a website? Are you going to be
We
setting
don't have
that
a
up?
website yet. They can contact, the easiest thing to do right at the moment, I think in August you're going to start seeing this, because we don't really yet have a city fund set up. The Historical Commission, as you know, because you were the head of the commission, voted in March to support the project. So we do have a lot of gung-ho support from the Parks Department and the commission, and from other people in the city government. What we need to do is set up an account with the city, because you can actually donate money to the city if it's for a charitable purpose, and that is tax deductible, just like you're donating to a 501c3. So we decided we're not going to start. Starting a 501c3 nonprofit organization is a very long process.
There's a lot of
And
paperwork, and
a
it
lot of
costs money,
paperwork, costs money.
and it costs money to keep it
And
going.
you have to
IRS
have a
approvals
board
and
of
all that,
trustees
yeah.
and all these things, and we really didn't want to do that. We wanted to work mostly through the commission and as volunteers and working with other people in the community. So there's potential for, if anybody's interested, to please just look on my Facebook page is the easiest way to find me, Aurora Eaton Writer, or my email is in the paper every single week. So just contact me
So at
directly
this point, you're the
moment.
go-to person, and
At
then
this
something where
moment.
it's gonna grow out starting
Yeah.
next
And
month.
we will have a bank account set up. I mean, the city is willing, it just takes the approval of the board and mayor of Alderman and all of that. So about
Yeah.
August, we'll be set to go.
So you're
Yes.
participating in this one too.
Sure.
Somehow I'm not surprised.
Well, you know what I want to talk about, and we're up against another break, but if we can, we've talked about the need. Okay, the statue was placed back in the Depression. It's what, 80 years old. I mean, it's getting on. Unfortunately, in Manchester, unlike Cambridge, we don't have the kind of funds where we, routinely maintain any of these monuments. I mean, we're busy trying to get the streets plowed sometimes, trying to get the kids educated.
Right.
So the idea that people, one, with expertise and who've done this before, I think that's vitally important, and that's why I wanted to get you guys here on the show to explain to people, this isn't just a pie-in-the-sky idea. This, you guys have done this, and you know how to get this done. But I'd like to talk about what is the plan and who you've talked to. Regrettably, Aurora, you brought in some great photographs that we wanted to put up, but we're having some technical difficulties, so we're going to have to try to describe this. But the statue itself sits on a large, it's not stone, it's
granite.
Granite,
Yeah.
it is.
Granite plinth.
On a plinth, and then it's surrounded by an iron fence.
Correct.
And I'm presuming that if the statue's deteriorated, and there are also plaques
There are
with
some
information around
bronze
them,
plaques,
and those
yes.
are bronze. So you've got finish issues. I'm sure
Yeah.
the fence has probably been deteriorated to some extent.
Surprisingly, the fence is not in terrible shape,
No,
which we
it's-
were really happy to know. It's the original fence, but
Well, instead of
it does
having
need
me
some
guess,
work.
can you tell us tell us,
Yeah.
what's the plan? Are you going to come in? Is it going to be phased? Are you going to work on the plaques first? What do you have in mind for how to
We have to
make
get the
this
money
restoration?
first.
Get the money
We got the
first.
money.
Nothing
So-
happens without
Yeah.
the money.
And there is grant money available, and we will pursue everything that we
Yes.
possibly can, including the Polish community and the Franco-Canadian community and whoever. I mean, people are generous with things like this. I mean, right off the bat, we've had people say, absolutely, I will donate. So we know that the work needs to be done, but all of us agree, Parks and Rec and Aurora and I, no matter what, we have to have the money in hand before we do anything.
Do you have a minimum threshold before you can jump into action? Have you put a number to that? What are we talking about?
At the moment, the budget is at about 75,000, but I think we have to look at it very carefully, and it'd probably be higher than that. And that would include the fence and the whole monument. So it's very specifically focused on that, and nothing around it, because the Parks Department does have plans for doing some other work around it.
The park looks pretty good, you know.
The park looks really
It's
nice.
fine.
It's very well kept.
And when
so.
we first went there one winter day, and we had a key to get inside the fence for the fellow to come and look at the statue and really assess what needed to be done, and there were some people in the park who hang out there now and then, but they were so concerned and said, you know, you're not supposed to be in there. And we loved it, and we said, we're going to give the general a facelift, he's going to look great, and they loved that. So
Yeah.
it was a really neat
Yeah.
From
response.
day one,
right
from day one, you
one.
have
Yeah.
some interaction
It was
with the
wonderful.
community. That's great.
Yeah.
But to your question, this is probably when it happens. I think it's probably all going to happen at once. And so what'll happen is the fence will be removed, and there'll be a temporary fence put around it, and then the monument can be worked on at the same time. And so the fence is going to be taken to a shop somewhere to be taken care of, because it has lead paint on it and needs to be removed, and it's actually easier for them to take it off-site. So,
Well, we're ready for our final break of the day, but after that, I think I want to now start, we can come back, we can talk about, how do you repair a statue, Are there people that do that?
Oh,
yes,
yes,
maybe
there
we
is. There is.
I'd like to ask these ladies about what the status is of the Valley Street Cemetery too.
Yeah.
We
Probably
can,
got some things you can tell us about that.
I know there was a crew working in there just last weekend.
I love the place, and I do tours there. I'm going to be doing a tour in the fall, so
Okay,
I am always concerned about it.
yeah, there's reason for concern, I guess.
Well, we'll get to
Okay,
that on the
we'll
other
be
side
right
of the
back.
break.
Okay, so this is the progress report for this Wednesday, July 19th. And we are on our last segment, and we again will welcome calls at 640-3091 if you want to participate. And thanks to Mike Farley's initiative, who's here with me, of course, we are discussing some issues of preserving Manchester's history. The success of the project at Stark Park we've talked about. Now we're talking about the next priority is the restoration and preservation of the statue of Casimir Pulaski in Pulaski Park right there on Bridge Street. And we're talking about that, and I'm sure we'll get on to other subjects, but we're very, very pleased to have Pat Howard and Rory Eaton with us here for this edition of the Progress Report. So,
Well, as I started to talk about before the last break, how do you do this? I mean, we okay, the fence is going to go away, and of course, lead paint is always an issue on anything old, so they're going to strip that. And I'm sure, I mean, a picket fence, it can be restored by an appropriate metal shop, but the statue, that's a different story. Are you guys? Who does that kind of work? Are you bringing in a sculptor, or do they take it down into a sculptor's shop? How do they? Are they going to be, brazing? What can you tell us about how this works?
He'll be fixed right in place, right where he is. There is a wonderful company we have dealt with, and we actually, with Parks and Rec, have agreed on 2 companies. We haven't signed contracts and we don't have the money, so it's probably not the right thing to talk about their names, but the person that we are dealing with is a wonderful expert, wonderful. He has done so many things, including the statue on top of the Capitol building in Washington, moving that down. So it took a while with Stark Park to find the experts, but now we've got them and we know exactly what we need to do.
Oh, that's valuable.
So it's huge,
yeah.
Well, we have a caller. We've got Jack on line 1.
Hi, Jack. Welcome to the Progress Report. Please go right ahead.
Okay. There's 2 issues I'd like to be concerned with, and these ladies are doing a great job. But first one is, my parents are buried at a cemetery on Fieldcrest Road. I don't think most people are familiar with that area. It's off Coolidge Ave.
Mm-hmm.
I do know where that
I know
is.
exactly the graveyard you're talking about. Yeah.
And it's atrocious. It really is.
Yeah.
That's number one. And I go over to visit my parents and everything else.
Okay, was there a number 2?
And, yeah, and the second thing is, I received a letter from Teddy Gatsas on a survey. And what's ironic is, last week I went to his office and gave a survey on education. And being a person that has been familiar with education for 42 years in the city of Manchester, he never responded to me, but yet he sends me a survey to the mail, and he expects me to respond to him.
Yeah.
Teddy Gatsas, and what's amazing, and I know the Greeks very well because I was married to a Greek girl, and I've been to Greece and everything else. Education is a primary thing with the Greeks. This guy has no clue whatsoever.
Can I respond about the grave site or the graveyard that you talked about?
Let's address that.
What we need to do in this day and age, cities do not have...
Thanks for the
Thanks
call,
for the
Jack.
call, Jack.
Cities don't have the money to do this.
Yeah.
But if you do the public partnership that Aurora and I are talking about, you can make things happen. And so I would say to Jack, that fellow, go for it. Get some people, start cleaning it up. I mean, you can do wonderful things together.
This cemetery he's talking about is right in my neighborhood, so I'm pretty familiar with it because
Yeah,
I
it's a
walk
small
those streets.
little pocket
And
cemetery.
obviously,
And it's
at one
beautiful.
time, there was a major entrance to the cemetery from Goffstown Road.
Right.
You could see the arch there. It's
Yeah.
that's where originally must have been a very impressive place, but it's there's no access from there now. You have to go, as he said, on Fieldcrest.
Yeah. Well, it's a huge responsibility for cities to own and have these old historic things, whether they are sculptures or buildings or whatever. It's very expensive. It's huge. But, you can do it.
There's value. The work put into these is an investment. You guys are not really going to be spending these donations. You're investing these donations into something that's going to be around for another 100 years
That's a good way
for
to
the
put it.
city. There will be return on your investment. It may not be in cash, it may not be in nickels, but and you won't even know what it is, because it's going to be someone driving through the city that's never been here that's going to turn their head, and it won't be gone, because that's what would have happened otherwise.
It would happen, yep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we harp on that on this show all the time. You know, you got to keep putting in, or else things decline. And we're really grateful to folks like you who are doing this. And this is a big undertaking. You've gotten a good response from Parks and Recreation. Are you dealing with any other people in the city? Have you talked to any aldermen?
Yes,
What do
we
they
have.
say about this?
Everybody's keen having us do it. I mean, it's really a very good thing, because it's not going to cost the city very much money. I mean,
Of course, they're keen. You're not asking for city money.
So we'll just do that. But
Yeah.
I mean, most of our money will come from individual donations and grant funds.
Yeah.
So, but Parks and Rec, Don Pennard, we work with him and Tom Matson. They're terrific. They're responsive. They're on this. They care about the city. So we will make it happen. Aurora and I will not have access to the bank account. I mean, except to put in the large donations, that's what I say. But we can't touch the money. It will be city money dedicated to this project.
Yeah. So I said, just for the break, or maybe it was during the break, that I'd like to ask you about the situation at the Valley Street Cemetery, which is a
Another one of our historical assets.
very much historic value in there. We have governors buried there, don't we, and mayors and all kinds of prominent
Members of the
citizens.
Stark family are still
Yes.
in that
And,
cemetery.
there was a major project to get that all spruced up a while ago. I forget the gentleman's name. I think he was from Bedford. But Rory, you'll probably be able to tell me. And it looked like the thing was going great guns, and it looked like it kind of ran short of money, and the efforts kind of
Well, there was a lot of money. A 501c3 nonprofit was formed called the Friends of the Valley Cemetery, and it operated for quite a while, and they raised hundreds of thousands of dollars and had, public-private partnerships going. But I think from what I can see, these kinds of things need people to be involved, and I think eventually it just kind of lost its impetus in terms of having volunteers who are willing to
I can remember
raise the money and do all these kinds of things. It's really, really, really hard to maintain these things.
I can remember
So-
seeing Jane Beaulieu alone painting the fence,
Yeah,
making
so
her
as
way
far as I
down
know-
She would do
Valley
that,
Street,
Yeah,
you
and
know,
she
all
was
by herself.
tremendous with that. And as far as I know, that entity has been dissolved as an entity, because you have to register with the state and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean it cannot be revived or something else can happen. So I'm a little uncertain as to what's going to happen, because they did a lot of work on the chapel, which to stabilize it, and that could actually be a really wonderful resource for the park and for the city at some point. But I don't really have a lot of information, beyond what you already know.
Okay.
I just know myself personally that I'm in love with the park, and I try to do at least one tour a year, and forget the date, but sometime in the fall I'm doing a tour for OLLI, which is Osher Lifelong
Right.
Learning Institute, focusing on the Civil War history in the park. There's a lot of connections to the Civil War,
Oh,
because
that
that
would
was
be
the
very
era of the
interesting.
park.
Yeah.
But this is one of the first garden cemeteries in America. It was built about 10 years after the cemetery in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Mount Auburn.
Mount Auburn.
Which is
and it was
spectacular.
imitating Mount
Spectacular.
Auburn to a great
Worth a
extent.
visit.
And that is an entity that is kind of like a corporation, so they do have active burials there, so they do have a lot of funding. This is a different situation, because this is not really an active graveyard.
tougher, yeah.
I think it's really hard. If somebody wanted to be buried there, there's really no plots they could sell. There's really too many there, but it's just a beautiful spot, and I hope that perhaps another organization can be formed to sort of kind of get it moving.
So how much was done, and how much still needs to be done there to bring that up to snuff?
I don't really know, to tell you
Yeah.
the truth. I don't have a, maybe if you can talk to Jane, give Jane a call and find out what's going on with
Yeah,
that.
we
but-
should do that, because
but
she's
it's
certainly
so
been a
hard,
wonderful
when you
volunteer.
have volunteers. You can't have one person do everything, and sometimes things work. And Friends of Stark Park is a great example of that, because it's a community. People live there.
Yeah.
They are invested in their community. With a graveyard that's kind of in a different neighborhood, it's probably not as easy. And this is it's 30 acres of land. It's kind of hard
Big, yeah.
to do that, but there's still a great deal of beauty in there, and a great deal of history, and a lot of connections to American history that you can find.
So you've got the Stark Park. A lot has been done there, and it's a great community support for keeping that park vibrant.
Yeah.
And you've got your project ahead with General Pulaski and his monument at Pulaski Park. What else is on your horizon for things to do? Or is that
Well, we can always
I think
dream.
we'll
I
finish that one.
You're
Let's do
only
that
two
one.
dynamic ladies. I mean, but there's probably a limit to what you can do. But
We'd
I just
like to
wondered
see
what
this one
else-
get
what's-
done.
What else is on your?
There's plenty of other monuments, obviously.
Excuse
We have looked at, I think, if we were to do another project, and I probably shouldn't talk about things that are really theoretical at this point, I think the next one we might look at is Victory Park, because it's actually the same sculptor, and the
Same sculptor as
It's Gosselin,
Okay.
Lucien Gosselin, who also designed
Did-
that one. It's a
did
very different
Pulaski.
style,
Yeah.
but it's a really wonderful monument, and, it looks good. I think that it would need to be really examined in terms of what's going on with the statue that's way at the top of it. And the same people that looked, the experts who looked at the Pulaski Monument also looked at that for us, just to kind of give us their opinion, general opinion, which we don't have any quotes or anything like that, but they were in love with it. So as a piece of art, it's really wonderful.
There's
And they've
plenty
done
to be done, plenty.
plenty to be done.
I want to put on your list the Manchester Compass Station, which, Pat, you
Well,
you know that
yes,
we have
that would be
talked about.
lovely.
Yeah.
That, as amusing as it may be to
Yes.
talk about, that is actually a very important piece of municipal architecture
Correct.
in America. One of
how
the
did they come about?
It is one of the first public sanitation stations. It was part of the movement to public health, and it was one of the
Yeah.
first implementations of a plan to provide public amenities.
Before Boston, it was the first public restroom in New England.
Really?
And it's amazing inside.
If you were to go in there, oak and marble,
Marble, I
and
know,
brass,
it's something.
and, the finest of materials,
Yeah.
and an office for the attendant to make sure that things went according to plan. It really is. The thing about that, of course, we know the history of it, and that is an expensive undertaking to maintain on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it were restored to its grandeur, it would take an ongoing commitment to to
Right,
keep
you'd
it
have
open
to have
for
some
the
way to have
city.
access to it, and whether, to show it or to use it, I'm not sure, but
But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We
Yes.
have one wonderful project on the plate. The financing is getting into place, and will probably be in place within a month. We have two very dedicated people with experience who are spearheading it. You've talked to the Parks and Rec, have you gathered support from the community? Are there people that are volunteering on your email list? Are you meeting
There-
with folks to get that going?
Well, the first people who are the most interested are the people at the Holy Trinity Polish National Cathedral, including Bishop Paul's, and I always pronounce his name incorrectly, I'll say Sobiechowski, but I think it's pronounced differently in Polish, and also the people at St. Hedwig's Church, because these are the two Polish parishes. And a lot of other people we've just chatted with who are interested in it. So we just haven't launched that part of it yet, because we had to get quotes, we had to see how much it's going to cost, we have to see what needs to be done, and that's taken quite a while. We started last fall, and we're
So
still
you're doing
working.
this groundwork by yourselves? I mean,
At the moment.
holy cow.
We have no problem with, we just felt that we could just do it, so we're just
We're a
doing
great
it.
team. We are really a great team because it was.
We've worked together before, because
Yeah.
Pat, when I was at the Historic Association, Pat is still actually on the Historic Preservation Committee, which has the awards every year, and so we got to know each other through that, and I am now newly on the Heritage Commission, and Pat has been on the Heritage Commission, so we have sort of those connections. So we felt it was good to get it started ourselves, and then to bring other people in.
Well, I certainly hope, we're getting toward the end of our hour. I certainly hope that this show plays a small part in getting interest in the project. I think it's a great project. I'd like to be involved. Pat, you know how to get in touch with me,
I do.
and I think that these are the treasures of Manchester that we need to preserve, or they're going to go away. We're going to lose them. We're going to get nothing for them.
Yeah.
So if we don't invest, we're going to lose the money, what we've already invested.
Correct.
And maybe we could come back another time and talk about
And
the
have-
bank account and have pictures and
And
so
have
on.
pictures and
We would love
and
to
give
do
you some
that.
history
I
of the
really
park.
regret-
Disappointed that the pictures didn't work.
I wanted
Yeah.
to ask you about the hat that the general's wearing.
Oh, the hat is
We can't even
wonderful.
talk about it because we don't have
Yeah.
the picture. It looks like he just got out of high
Well,
school.
anybody who's
something.
anybody who's watching the show, go into Pulaski Park and really look at that wonderful sculpture because it's so detailed, and the artist did so much research on exactly what the costume looked like and what General Casimir Pulaski looked like, and it's really fabulous. There's so
It
much
really is. It's
wonderful
beautiful.
things going on, and the horse is magnificent too.
And it was modeled right here on the
Yeah,
west
he
side.
did it on the west side
Yeah.
on Queeran
Oh,
Street.
no kidding.
On Queeran Street, that's where, and now there's apartments in that building, but he actually did it right there. He did the whole plaster of the entire thing, life size, and then that was brought down to somewhere in Massachusetts where it was cast in bronze. So all the work was done in Manchester. This is really a Manchester thing here.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, I wish we had more time to
I
talk,
wish we
but
had
we
more
will
time. That
have to
just
get
made
you
me
guys
want to
back.
talk about the boxcar over on the side.
Oh, the box
Oh, we do
car.
have to get to that.
Boxcar,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
Is that in good shape? Was that?
That's in great shape, yeah.
Yeah.
But it needs to be seen by people. People don't
Yeah.
know it's even
Yeah,
there.
and it's such an interesting
It's
thing to
really
visit.
neat.
I just read an interesting historic novel about World War One, and they mentioned in that novel about
Oh.
these boxcars,
boxcars.
40 and
Got on TV.
40 and 8.
40 and
48.
8. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we're out of time, Bob.
This is
We'll have
this
to
has
bring
been
them back.
great. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining
You're
us
welcome.
and for doing what you do to help preserve this wonderful history we have. It's and for writing about it so well.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you both. You're a good team, and I'm sure you'll accomplish your
Mm-hmm.
goals, and that'd be good for us if you do. We'll be back next week, folks. If it's Wednesday at 7 o'clock, it's time for the Progress Report. I believe you'll be here,
I'll be here.
and I'll be here. See you then.
See you next week.